I've been making sound, so I just moved it down a little bit. Before I actually begin the sermon, I just want to draw your attention to the scriptures that Bob read so beautifully for us. In the first one, the book of Jonah, which we don't use that much in our religious services, but it's very pertinent to this, and it's directly related to the reading from Luke, when Jesus is instructing them, going all the way from Moses through the prophets. Now, I like to do historical study related to the Bible, and James Tabor is one of the instructors that I like to check in on. And just recently he posted some information regarding a tomb discovery, an old bone box in Jerusalem. They're finding so many things in Jerusalem continuously. But this particular ossuary, which is a bone box, had an engraving on it. And it was an image of the whale vomiting Jonah up onto the beach. And it was dated to the 1st century. So we've always thought of the fish as a symbol of Christ, but one of the earliest symbols was Jonah being expelled from the whale, the resurrection on the 3rd day. It makes me tingle to think of the connections that are built to prepare us for Christ's coming. And then when I read Luke, I'm thinking to myself, all the scriptural studies I've been through in my lifetime, we have beautiful Bible studies here with Pastor Bob. This is a group of scripture readers. But what would it be like to have Jesus teach you the scriptures from Moses through the prophets as you walk along heading home? That's just really overwhelming. Now, I want to talk about that concept of them, the 2 disciples not recognizing Jesus. It happens to us too. I'm going to give you a personal experience, and it wasn't about recognizing Jesus. It was about recognizing a family member. And Jesus is a family member, if you think about it that way. So here's what happened. I was on a high school field trip. I was in the 11th grade, and our American history class was taking a field trip. It took 2 buses because it wasn't just one class period. There were a couple of class periods put together, and we had 2 school buses that drove from our town in the upper Piedmont of North Carolina to Asheville. And many of you have familiarity with Asheville, North Carolina. It's a very large city, beautiful, a lot of creative things going on there. And of course, one of its biggest tourist attractions, or sadly I will say, was one of its biggest tourist attraction. It has not recovered from the hurricane from last fall. And they're trying to restore all those historical things inside that were lost or damaged. But we were there on a beautiful spring day, and any kid in high school loves going on a field trip because you're not stuck in the classroom, and you can talk all you want to on the bus and out and about. So it's just great. So I was sitting with my friends, and we pulled up. We had special passes, so we pulled up right to the front door, which you really can't do. They usually have shuttle you over to a parking site, but we had a special pass, so we pulled up to the front door. Magnificent doorway. You can imagine this is a Vanderbilt house with big stone lions. It's beautiful. So we were sitting around on the bus until we were released from the bus, and some of my friends pointed out this cute little girl running around. She looked to be about 2.5 maybe, and she was on the steps playing, going back and forth between the lions. And of course we were thought she was really cute, but then also we were wondering, where's her mother, where's her father? This little kid's running around by herself. International visitors there, it was mobbed. And so we were wondering, where's the adult supervision? And pretty soon we saw this lady walking across the gravel drive towards her, calling her name. Couldn't hear anything, but we could see her walking, and I thought, that lady looks familiar to me. And I looked, and then I realized that was my aunt. That was my mother's brother's wife. And that little girl was her daughter, my first cousin. Now, I'll admit, the child was 3. We found out later she had already turned 3, and I was 16. So the last time I had seen her, she was a baby, and she had changed quite a bit. But recognized my aunt straight away. So, of course, I screamed out, "That's my aunt!" And I ran to the front of the bus. The driver opened the door, and I could go over and have a hug and a visit with her. She and her mother, with my cousin, were on the way to visit my Aunt Barbara's family in Indiana. And they did that during the summer months. She would take the baby. They later had a son, my other cousin, but at that time it was just Anna that went with them. So we had a little chit-chat, quick visit, and then I had to join the school group. Okay? But I didn't recognize her. I didn't recognize the child, and it took me a little bit to recognize my aunt because it was not in context. She lived on the eastern shore of the state of North Carolina, and I was on the western shore. And to get from one to the other, as we used to say, from Murphy to Manteo. Murphy is the furthest west town in North Carolina. Manteo is on the Outer Banks, and that's the area the Lost Colony was in. So we hadn't, I hadn't seen her in a long time. But it just helps us to realize that we have to have a reference, a point of reference to make mental connections in order to really see other people, even if we're familiar with them. So, tying that to today's scriptures in Luke, the 2 disciples don't recognize Jesus because they cannot believe he's alive. We have 2 other instances in John's gospel in which his disciples don't recognize the risen Jesus. The first one that I always think of is Mary Magdalene. That's in the Gospel of John, chapter 20, 11 to 18. Mary Magdalene mistakes the resurrected Jesus for the gardener and asks if he knows where they've put Jesus' body. She doesn't recognize him until he says her name, Mary. And then she responds with Rabbi. The same thing happens in another chapter of John, chapter 21, last chapter, verses 1 to 7. We have some of the disciples fishing with Peter in the Sea of Galilee, but they're not being very successful. Then, as they're returning to shore, they see someone standing there, got a fire going. He calls to them to throw their net on the right side of the boat, and then they'll find some fish. When they struggle to pull in that enormous catch, the beloved disciple announces to Peter, "It is the Lord." They don't see him as Jesus until we get the catch, the miraculous catch of the fishes. And we already know what Jesus has done earlier with fishes. Actions and words help them make the connection which their eyes cannot. Same thing happens with us. In Luke's story of the 2 disciples hurrying away from Jerusalem, we encounter the same thing. Now, Luke tells us the name of one of the disciples, Cleopas, but not the other. If you're going to name one, why not name them both? Scriptural scholars have written that it is because this disciple is always connected with Cleopas in the Gospels. This disciple is among those who stood at the foot of the cross and did not flee as others did. This disciple is Mary, the wife of Cleopas, who is named in John 19, verse 25. Near the cross stood his mother's sister Mary, Mary the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. So this disciple, and here the story deepens a little, is not just any disciple. She's the aunt of Jesus. So how in the world did she not recognize him? And I'll return to this shortly. Let's look at what Luke tells us about the journey of Cleopas and Mary as they hurry home to Emmaus, seeking a safe place to hide. They, like the other disciples who are hiding in the upper room, fear they will be executed by the Romans as followers of Jesus, troublemakers. They do not walk alone, however, as Jesus soon joins them, unrecognized by either. In fact, they are shocked that he has no idea what's happened in Jerusalem, as every observant Jew had been in the city for the Passover. Thus, they explained to him what had taken place. They explained to him his own crucifixion and death. And they also say to him that some women from their group had claimed that Jesus' body was not in the tomb. Yeah. Jesus rebukes them and then proceeds to open for them all the scriptures from Moses to the prophets, which had spoken about him. He schooled them and prepared them to accept his resurrection, which he had assured them would happen after his death. Still, that wasn't enough for these two to recognize Jesus walking alongside them. Upon reaching Emmaus, Cleopas and Mary invite the stranger into their home for the night. This is a right action of welcoming the stranger, as stated in Leviticus 19:33-34. It is only during the meal and the breaking of the bread that Cleopas and Mary truly see Jesus, and then he disappears. This resurrection story is one of my favorite ones, and here's why. It reminds me that Jesus can be alongside us at any moment. We won't know it's him. After all, he doesn't look the same in his resurrected form as he did in his incarnated self. He could be anyone. He did promise that he would never leave us. In John 14:18, he says, I will not leave you orphans. I will come to you. He will not leave us comfortless, desolate, bereaved, forlorn, helpless. He will and does come to us. Jesus also reminds us in Matthew 18:20, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm there with them. If we truly believe this, then he's here today, right now, in this holy space. He is with us also outside this space. He is there in the world with us, sharing our sorrows, our pain, our misery, and our worry. He feels our wounds. Years ago, when I was teaching at a Catholic high school, and many of you have heard me say this, I shared with my students what my daily prayer included on my drive to and from school. The privilege of teaching in a religious school is that you can pray with your students. In fact, we're told to. Open each class with prayer, open each morning with prayer, close each school day with prayer. And we had a full mass at least once a month, and you had to go. So we definitely were a praying group. But what I told them, my prayer included, it was about a 25-minute drive. And I would just say it over and over again. Lord, let me truly see Jesus in everyone I meet today. Now, I stole that and reworded a little bit from Mother Teresa, but that was part of what her prayer was too, and I thought it was beautiful. If we can truly see Jesus in everyone we meet today. Now I'm going to go in the Wayback Machine for a moment, all the way back to 1995, when my students introduced me to a Joan Osborne song. It was very popular then. Other singers have picked it up and done it since then, but I think Joan was the first one. The name of the song was, What If God Was One of Us? And these are the lyrics that really spoke to me. What if God was one of us? Just a slob like one of us. Just a stranger among us, trying to make his way home. If God had a face, what would it look like? And would you want to see? If seeing meant you had to believe in things like heaven and in Jesus and the saints and all the prophets. What I hope you take from my message today is this. We may never know who Jesus is in disguise, but we can be certain that he is among us. He gives us a guide in Matthew 25, 35, and 40, chapter 25, verses 35 and 40. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. And you know there's so many more prisons than the ones that are official. The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Jesus appears to us in the most vulnerable of our communities, the downtrodden and disheartened, the sick and suffering, those marginalized by society. We are called to recognize him in our midst among these and to not turn away from them. We need to look them in the eye, not look away. We may find ourselves as one of them at some time. When we truly see others and reach them where they are, then we can begin to see Jesus looking back at us. In closing, I wish you to remember, all of us are on our own road to Emmaus, trying to find that place of safety and security and faith. We're not walking alone. The one who promised never to leave us, leads the way. Amen.